In the quiet town of Willow Creek, Montana, a weathered notice hung on the post office bulletin board, gathering dust for nearly a year. It read, "Housekeeper and groundskeeper needed at Widow's Hollow Estate. Decent pay. No inquiries into past." The paper was tattered, its edges curling, ignored by the townsfolk who whispered about the estate's owner, Evelyn Hawthorne, a woman whose name carried a chill sharper than a winter wind. Widow's Hollow was a breathtaking sight from afar. Acres of rolling meadows framed by jagged peaks, with a grand stone manor perched like a sentinel overlooking the valley. But up close, it was a place of shadows. Evelyn, once known for her warmth, had turned cold after losing her husband and daughter in a tragic carriage accident 5 years prior. Her laughter had vanished, replaced by a sharp tongue and a demeanor that drove away every worker she hired. Enter Samuel Tate, a man with weathered boots and a past he didn't talk about. He drifted through 3 towns in as many years, each departure marked by rumors he couldn't outrun. When he arrived in Willow Creek that crisp October morning, he saw the notice and didn't hesitate. He needed work, and Evelyn needed someone who wouldn't flinch at her reputation. What happens when 2 wounded souls find solace in the unlikeliest of places? Samuel stepped off the stagecoach, his canvas bag slung over one shoulder. It held all he owned: a spare shirt, a worn Bible, and a pocketknife etched with his initials. The air smelled of pine and frost, a reminder of the harsh Montana winters to come. Willow Creek was a small settlement, clapboard shops, a saloon, a church with a crooked steeple, all nestled against the rugged beauty of the mountains. He touched the small brass watch in his pocket, a keepsake from his father, who died when Samuel was a boy. It was a relic of a life before debt and disgrace had stripped him of everything but his resolve. Once, he'd been a respected surveyor, mapping land for railroad. Now, he was just a man looking for a fresh start. "You sure about this, stranger?" asked the stagecoach driver, a grizzled man named Amos. "Widow Hawthorne's place ain't welcoming. She's got a temper sharper than a rattler's bite." Samuel nodded, his jaw set. "I've heard the talk. But work's work, and I'm not picky." Amos shook his head and snapped the reins, leaving Samuel in a cloud of dust. The post office bulletin board was just across the street, the notice still pinned there like a dare. Samuel read it again, memorizing the words: "Widow's Hollow Estate. Decent pay. No inquiries into past." It was as if the job had been written for him. A woman approached, her gray hair tucked into a neat bun, her eyes sharp but kind. "I'm Clara Benson," she said, offering a hand. "I run the dry goods store. You must be the fella asking about the Hawthorne job when the stage came through Redstone last week." Samuel shook her hand, surprised by her firm grip. "Word gets around fast." "Faster than a spring river," Clara said with a chuckle. "Folks say you're either brave or foolish taking that job. I'm leaning toward brave, but time'll tell. I'm Samuel Tate, ma'am. And I'm here to work, if Mrs. Hawthorne will have me." Clara's smile faded. "You know about her, don't you? Evelyn was a good woman once, before the accident. Loved her husband, doted on her little girl. But losing them both, it broke something in her. That estate's like a mausoleum now. She barely speaks, barely eats. Only old Jonah, her groundskeeper, sticks around, and he says she talks more to her roses than to him." Samuel felt a flicker of empathy. He knew what it was like to carry loss like a stone in your chest. Maybe she just needs someone who won't run off at the first harsh word. Clara studied him, her eyes narrowing. "You've got your own ghosts, don't you? The kind that make a man take a job nobody else wants." "Don't we all?" Samuel said, his voice light but his eyes guarded. "I'm not here to tell stories, ma'am. I'm here to work." Clara nodded, satisfied. "Come into my store. You'll need supplies if you're heading to Widow's Hollow. And don't thank me yet, thank me if you're still there by Christmas." She led him to her shop, a warm space filled with barrels of flour, jars of preserves, and the faint scent of leather. Clara packed a small sack with essentials: a sturdy apron, a tin of coffee, a bar of soap. "A man needs to look respectable, even doing rough work," she said. "And this," she handed him a wrapped loaf of bread and a jar of chokecherry jam. "Evelyn's got to eat, even if she's forgotten how." The walk to Widow's Hollow took an hour, the trail winding through meadows dotted with wildflowers and stands of aspen. The estate came into view as Samuel crested a hill, a grand manor of gray stone, its windows dark, its gardens overgrown but still beautiful. It was a place that should have been alive with laughter, but the silence was heavy, broken only by the rustle of leaves. An old man emerged from a shed, limping slightly, his face creased like old leather. This had to be Jonah, the groundskeeper who'd stayed through Evelyn's worst days. "You the one from town?" Jonah asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Come for the job?" "I am. Is Mrs. Hawthorne in?" Jonah glanced at the manor, then back at Samuel. "She's inside. But a word of advice, son, think twice. She ain't been herself since the accident." "I know about her losses," Samuel said quietly. "And I'm here to try." Jonah nodded, respect in his eyes. "You seem steady enough. I'll pray for you both." The manor's front door was heavy oak, carved with roses now faded by time. Samuel knocked, the sound echoing inside. Slow footsteps approached, and the door opened to reveal Evelyn Hawthorne. She was not what he expected, tall and striking, with raven hair streaked with silver, her green eyes sharp as broken glass. Grief had etched lines into her face, but she was still beautiful, like a storm cloud on the horizon. "Mrs. Hawthorne," Samuel said, keeping his voice steady. "I'm Samuel Tate. I'm here about the job." She studied him, her gaze piercing. "You know what it entails? Housekeeping, grounds work, cooking if I ask. The last 3 men quit within a month." "I'm not them," Samuel said simply. "I need the work, and you need the help. Seems fair." Something flickered in her eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or doubt. "You're bold for a drifter. Fine. Kitchen's that way, your room's upstairs, first on the right. $30 a month, meals included. Leave when you want, and I can dismiss you when I want." "Understood," Samuel said, stepping inside. The manor was grand but cold, its high ceilings and polished floors covered in a fine layer of dust. It felt like a house holding its breath, waiting for life to return. "Start tomorrow," Evelyn said, turning away. "And don't expect me to hold your hand." As Samuel followed her directions to the kitchen, he touched the watch in his pocket. Whatever lay ahead, he was here now, ready to make a stand. Samuel woke before dawn, the Montana air sharp with the promise of frost. His room at Widow's Hollow was sparse but clean, a narrow bed, a washstand, a window overlooking the sprawling estate. It was more than he'd had in years, a small anchor in a life adrift. He dressed in his work clothes, a faded shirt and sturdy trousers, and headed downstairs to the kitchen. The manor was quieter than a church at midnight, but in the faint light of early morning, it felt less like a tomb and more like a house waiting to wake up. Samuel lit the cast-iron stove, the crackle of kindling a small rebellion against the silence. He set coffee to brew and explored the pantry, finding it surprisingly well-stocked. Sacks of flour, jars of dried beans, preserved peaches, and a slab of salt pork. Someone, likely old Jonah, had kept the essentials in order, even if Evelyn seemed to have forgotten how to live. He was kneading dough for biscuits when Evelyn appeared in the kitchen doorway, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes wary. She wore a black dress that might have been elegant once but now hung loose on her frame, a testament to years of neglect. "Morning, Mrs. Hawthorne," Samuel said, keeping his tone neutral. "Coffee's ready, and breakfast will be in a few." She poured herself a cup, her movements precise but distant, and stood by the window, staring out at the frost-dusted meadows. "You don't need to cook for me," she said, her voice clipped. "I manage." "Managing's not the same as eating well," Samuel replied, sliding the biscuits into the oven. "A body needs proper food to face the day. I've been getting by just fine." Her tone was sharp, but Samuel caught the hollow look in her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly around the mug. "When did you last eat a full meal?" he asked, cracking eggs into a skillet with practiced ease. Evelyn didn't answer, which told him everything. He fried the eggs with care, adding a splash of cream from the cold cellar, and crisped strips of bacon until the kitchen filled with their savory aroma. When he set a plate before her, she stared at it like it was a foreign object. "It's been a while since anyone cooked for me," she said, almost too soft to hear. "Then it's about time someone did," Samuel replied, sitting across from her with his own plate. They ate in silence, the only sounds the clink of forks and the distant lowing of cattle. When Evelyn finished, she looked surprised, as if she hadn't expected to enjoy the meal. "Thank you," she said, the words stiff but genuine. Samuel nodded, clearing the plates. "I'll start on the house today. Anything particular you want done?" "Clean what needs cleaning," she said, rising. But stay out of the west wing upstairs. That's not your concern. He caught the edge in her voice, the warning not to push. Understood. After she left, Samuel began his work. The manor was vast. 10 rooms on the ground floor, 8 upstairs. Dust coated the furniture, and the air was stale from closed windows. He started in the parlor, opening shutters to let in light, wiping down tables that gleamed beneath their neglect. It was there he found the first traces of Evelyn's lost family, a small embroidered pillow, its colors faded, tucked into a corner chair. On a side table, faint outlines in the dust marked where photographs had once stood, now gone. The west wing called to him, though. Curiosity tugged, but he respected Evelyn's boundary, for now. Instead, he focused on the grounds, joining Jonah to mend a fence near the stables. The old man worked with quiet efficiency, his hands steady despite his age. "You're still here," Jonah said, hammering a nail into a post. "Most don't last a day with her." "I'm stubborn," Samuel said with a half-smile. "And I've nowhere else to be." Jonah grunted, approval in his eyes. "She ain't cruel, you know. Just broken. Lost her husband, Michael, and little Clara in that accident. Carriage went off a cliff in a storm. Evelyn was the only one who walked away. Blames herself, though ain't nobody's fault but the weather." Samuel nodded, his hands pausing on the fence wire. He knew survivor's guilt, the way it gnawed at you. Maybe she needs someone to remind her there's still life to live. Jonah studied him. "You got a story, don't you? What brought you here, son?" "Same as most drifters," Samuel said, evading. "Bad luck, worse choices. But I know my way around a house and a hammer. That's enough for now." They worked until the sun dipped low, painting the mountains gold. As Samuel returned to the manor, he found Evelyn in the garden, kneeling among overgrown roses. Her hands moved gently, pruning dead blooms, her face softer than he'd seen it. For a moment she looked like a woman who remembered how to care. "Garden's beautiful," he said, approaching cautiously. "Needs work, but the bones are good." She glanced up, startled, then stood, brushing dirt from her hands. It was Michael's pride. "He planted these roses for Clara. I try to keep them alive, but," she trailed off, her eyes distant. "I can help if you like," Samuel offered. "I know a bit about plants." Evelyn's gaze sharpened, as if weighing his intentions. "Do what you want," she said finally, turning back to the house. "Just don't expect me to thank you." That evening, Samuel cooked a simple supper, stew from the pantry stores, thickened with potatoes and flavored with herbs he'd found in the garden. When Evelyn sat to eat, he saw her pause, her spoon hovering over the bowl. "This is Clara's recipe," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where did you find it?" "Notebook in the pantry," Samuel said. "Had her name on it. Thought it might be nice to try." Evelyn took a bite and her eyes closed briefly, pain and memory flickering across her face. She loved this stew, she said. Used to beg for it every Sunday. Samuel let the silence hold, giving her space to remember. When she looked at him again, there was something new in her eyes. Not warmth, not yet, but a crack in the wall she'd built around herself. The days at Widow's Hollow settled into a quiet rhythm. Samuel rose before dawn, tending to the manor and grounds with a steady hand. He scrubbed floors, repaired creaking shutters, and coaxed the rose garden back to life, pruning dead branches and enriching the soil with compost from Jonah's piles. The estate began to breathe again, the windows sparkled, the air smelled of fresh bread, and the roses bloomed brighter than they had in years. Evelyn remained distant, her words sharp but less cutting. She ate the meals Samuel prepared, though she rarely commented beyond a curt nod. Yet he noticed small things. The way she lingered over coffee, the way her fingers traced the edge of Clara's recipe book when she thought he wasn't looking. Samuel didn't push, sensing that trust, like the roses, needed time to grow. One frosty November morning, while cleaning the study, Samuel found a hidden drawer in the heavy oak desk that once belonged to Michael Hawthorne. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Michael's neat script. The entries detailed the estate's history, land disputes, water rights, and a name that kept appearing. Victor Crane, a wealthy speculator who'd tried to buy Widow's Hollow years ago. Michael had refused, and the entries grew tense, hinting at threats and sabotage. The final entry, dated a month before the accident, read, "Crane's back. He wants the creek. I won't let him ruin what we've built for Clara." Samuel's stomach tightened. He'd heard whispers in town about Victor Crane, a man whose money bought loyalty and whose grudges lasted lifetimes. Was Crane still a threat? He tucked the journal back into the drawer, deciding to tell Evelyn later. She deserved to know, but he needed to choose the right moment. That afternoon, while Samuel was splitting firewood near the stables, a rider approached from the direction of Willow Creek. The man was tall, impeccably dressed, with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Jonah, mucking out stalls nearby, stiffened. "That's Victor Crane," he muttered. "Trouble in a fancy suit." "Mr. Tate," Crane called, dismounting with ease. "I'm told you're the new man keeping Widow's Hollow from falling apart." "I'm Victor Crane, a business associate of Mrs. Hawthorne's." Samuel set down his axe, his guard up. "Mrs. Hawthorne's not here right now. Anything I can help you with?" Crane's smile widened, but it felt like a blade. "I'm here to discuss the estate. I've made Evelyn an offer, a generous one, to buy this land. She's been reluctant. I thought you might have some influence, given how you've settled in." "I'm just the help," Samuel said, keeping his tone even. "I don't speak for her." "Oh, I think you're more than that," Crane said, stepping closer. "I make it my business to know people, Mr. Tate. Like your history in Boise, those unfortunate rumors about stolen survey maps, a ruined career. Must be hard, starting over with that kind of shadow." Samuel's jaw clenched. The accusations in Boise had been lies, spread by a rival to discredit him, but they'd cost him everything. "What do you want, Crane?" "Straight to the point." "I like that." Crane pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I have a letter here, signed by a man named Edward Hollis, your former employer. It details your indiscretions. Embezzlement, they say. Quite convincing. I wonder what Evelyn would think, or the good people of Willow Creek." "That's a lie," Samuel said, his voice low but steady. "And you know it." "Truth is what people believe," Crane replied smoothly. "Convince Evelyn to sell, and this letter stays buried. Refuse, and I'll make sure everyone from here to Helena knows exactly who you are." Samuel stepped forward, his fists tight. "Get off this land. Now." Crane chuckled, unruffled. "You have 5 days to think it over. After that, I'll share Mr. Hollis's letter with the town and Evelyn. Trust me, Mr. Tate, I always get what I want." As Crane rode away, Samuel felt the weight of his past pressing down. He hadn't told Evelyn about Boise, not wanting to burden her with his shame. But now, Crane's threat loomed like a storm cloud. He needed to tell her before Crane did, but the thought of her turning away, seeing him as the thief others had branded him, made his chest ache. That evening, as Samuel served a simple meal of roast chicken from Clara's recipe book, Evelyn ate in silence, her eyes fixed on the fire. Finally she spoke. "You're good at this," she said quietly. "Making this place feel like a home again. Clara would have liked that." Samuel seized the opening. "I found something today in the study. Michael's journal. He wrote about a man named Victor Crane, said he was trouble." Evelyn's fork paused, her face going pale. "Crane," she whispered. "He tried to buy this place before Michael died. Wanted the creek for some mining scheme. Michael refused, and then," her voice broke. "The accident happened a month later." "You think Crane had something to do with it?" Samuel asked gently. "I don't know," Evelyn said, her hands trembling. "The sheriff called it a storm, a bad road. But Crane was in town that week, and I've always wondered." Samuel reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers but not touching. "He was here today. Made me an offer to convince you to sell. Threatened to spread lies about my past if I don't." Evelyn's eyes snapped to his, sharp and searching. "What lies?" Samuel took a breath, then told her everything: the job in Boise, the false accusations of theft, the way he'd been run out of town. It wasn't true, but people believed it. "Crane's got a letter he says will ruin me here, too." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, her gaze unreadable. Then she stood, moving to the window. "Crane doesn't bluff," she said. "If he says he'll destroy you, he means it. But you told me the truth, even knowing what it might cost you." "I couldn't let him use it against us," Samuel said. "You deserve to know who's working for you." She turned to face him, her expression softening. "You're not just working for me, Samuel. You're here. In a way no one's been since Michael and Clara." The air between them shifted, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Samuel wanted to say more, to tell her how her quiet strength and stubborn heart had started to heal something in him. But before he could, hoofbeats echoed outside, a rider, approaching fast. Jonah burst through the door, his face grim. "Mrs. Hawthorne, Samuel, there's smoke rising from the north pasture. Looks like a fire." Evelyn's eyes widened, and Samuel was already grabbing his coat. "Crane," he said, "the name a curse." He's not waiting for an answer. Samuel and Evelyn raced outside, the acrid smell of smoke hitting them before they reached the porch. The north pasture glowed orange against the night sky, flames licking at the dry grass. Jonah was already at the stables, saddling horses to move the livestock to safety. "It's spreading fast," he shouted. "Wind's pushing it toward the hay barn." Evelyn's face was pale but resolute. "Samuel, get the buckets from the kitchen. We'll need every drop of water we can carry." Samuel nodded, his heart pounding. He'd fought fires before, but this felt different, deliberate, a strike meant to wound. As he filled buckets at the pump, he saw Evelyn pulling on work gloves, her black dress swapped for a practical shirt and trousers. She looked like a woman ready for battle, and despite the danger, Samuel felt a surge of admiration. They worked through the night, a desperate dance against the flames. Samuel and Jonah beat back the fire with wet sacks, while Evelyn hauled water, her strength belying her slight frame. The hay barn was saved, but the north pasture was scorched, a blackened scar stretching across 50 acres. By dawn, the fire was out, leaving the trio exhausted, their faces streaked with soot. Evelyn stood at the edge of the burned field, her hands clenched. "This was Crane," she said, her voice low and furious. "He's trying to break us." "He won't," Samuel said, wiping sweat from his brow. "We saved the barn, the horses, the house. He didn't get what he wanted." "Not this time," Jonah muttered, limping over. "But Crane don't give up easy. He'll come at you harder now." Evelyn turned to Samuel, her eyes searching. "He's targeting you too, isn't he?" "Because you're here, because you're helping me." Samuel met her gaze. "Let him try. I'm not running." Something flickered in Evelyn's expression, gratitude, maybe, or something deeper. "We can't fight him alone," she said. "Not if he's willing to burn us out." "Then we don't," Samuel said. "There's folks in Willow Creek who'd stand with us. Crane's not just after Widow's Hollow. He's been sniffing around every rancher with good land. We need allies." Evelyn hesitated, her instinct to isolate warring with the logic of his words. Finally, she nodded. "All right. We'll go to town tomorrow, talk to the others." "But Samuel," she paused, her voice softening. "Be careful. Crane doesn't just destroy land, he destroys people." As they returned to the manor, Samuel felt the weight of her warning. Crane's threat wasn't just about fire or land. It was personal, aimed at the fragile connection he and Evelyn were building. He thought of the letter Crane claimed to have, the lies that could unravel everything. He told Evelyn the truth, but would the town believe him when Crane spread his poison? That morning, as they cleaned up in the kitchen, Samuel found Evelyn staring at Clara's recipe book, her fingers tracing a faded note. "Michael's favorite, add extra time." "They loved this place," she said quietly. "Michael built it for Clara, for our future. I can't let Crane take that away." "You won't," Samuel said, standing beside her. "We'll fight him together." Evelyn looked at him, her green eyes softer than he'd ever seen. "Why are you doing this, Samuel? You could walk away, find work somewhere else. Why stay?" He touched the brass watch in his pocket, grounding himself. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything. And I'm starting to think this place, this life, might be worth fighting for." Before Evelyn could respond, hoofbeats sounded again. Samuel tensed, expecting Crane's men, but it was a group of riders from town, 5 men, led by a broad-shouldered rancher named Henry Walsh. "Evelyn, Samuel," Henry called, dismounting. "We saw the smoke last night. Came to see if you're all right." "We're standing," Evelyn said, her voice steady but tired. "Crane's work, we think." Henry's face darkened. "He's been at my place too. Offered to buy my water rights last week. When I said no, my fence line got cut. Lost 10 head of cattle." Another man, younger, with calloused hands, stepped forward. "Name's Eli Carter. Run a small spread east of here. Crane's men came by, said I'd regret not selling. I ain't scared, but I ain't stupid either. We need to band together." Samuel exchanged a glance with Evelyn. That's what we were thinking, he said. Crane's not just after Widow's Hollow. He wants the whole valley. If we stand united, he can't pick us off one by one. Henry nodded. We'll spread the word. Get every rancher from here to the river to meet in town tomorrow. If Crane wants a fight, he'll get one. As the men rode off, Evelyn turned to Samuel. You really think we can stop him? I think we have to try, Samuel said. For Michael, for Clara, for this place. Evelyn's hand brushed his, a fleeting touch that sent warmth through him. And for you, she said softly. You're part of this now, Samuel. Whether you meant to be or not. The moment hung between them, fragile and full of possibility. But as they walked back to the manor, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that Crane was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The next morning, Samuel and Evelyn rode into Willow Creek, the air crisp with the threat of early snow. The town was bustling, with ranchers and farmers gathering at the church for the meeting Henry Walsh had organized. Samuel felt the weight of curious eyes as he helped Evelyn down from the wagon. Whispers followed them, about her, the reclusive widow who'd shut out the world, about him, the drifter who'd taken the job no one wanted. But there was respect in those glances, too, for the woman who'd held Widow's Hollow together and the man who'd brought it back to life. Inside the church, the pews were filled with weathered faces, men and women who'd carved lives from Montana's unforgiving land. Henry Walsh stood at the front, his voice steady as he outlined Victor Crane's campaign. Offers to buy land, followed by threats, cut fences, and now fire. He thinks he can scare us into selling, Henry said. But if we stand together, he can't break us. Eli Carter, the young rancher, spoke up. Crane's got money, lawyers, and hired men. I heard he's bringing in more muscle from Helena. Professionals, not just cowhands. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Evelyn, seated beside Samuel, tensed, her hands gripping the edge of the pew. He's done this before, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. 5 years ago, he tried to buy Widow's Hollow. When my husband refused, our carriage went off a cliff. The sheriff called it an accident, but I've never believed it. The room went quiet, the weight of her words settling over everyone. Samuel reached for her hand under the pew, a silent promise of support. She didn't pull away, Henry nodded. We need to protect our land and our people. Crane's not above sabotage, or worse. We pool our resources, watch each other's spreads, share information, and if he sends his men, we meet them together. A rancher named Martha Reed, her face lined from years under the sun, stood. I'm in. Crane offered to buy my creek frontage last month. When I said no, my well was poisoned. Lost half my herd before we figured it out. One by one, others pledged their support. By the time the meeting ended, a plan was in place. Nightly patrols, signals for trouble, and a promise to bring any evidence of Crane's crimes to the territorial judge in Helena. Samuel felt a spark of hope, but also dread. Crane wasn't the kind to back down, and his next move would be personal. As they drove back to Widow's Hollow, Evelyn was quiet, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Finally she spoke. You didn't have to do this, Samuel. Stand up to Crane, put yourself in his sights. Why are you risking so much? He hesitated, the brass watch heavy in his pocket. Because I've been running from my past too long. This place, it's given me a reason to stop running. I'm not letting Crane take that away. Evelyn's eyes softened, and for the first time, she smiled, a small, tentative thing, but real. You're a stubborn man, Samuel Tate. Takes one to know one, he said, and her laugh, soft and unexpected, warmed him more than the weak November sun. That evening, as Samuel repaired a window frame in the manor's parlor, he found a small wooden box tucked behind a bookshelf. Inside was a delicate silver ring, its band etched with tiny roses. A note in Michael's handwriting read, "For Clara when she's old enough." Samuel's throat tightened. He could imagine Michael crafting it, picturing his daughter's future. He set the box on the table, intending to show Evelyn. She found him there, her eyes catching on the ring. "Where did you get that?" Her voice was sharp, but not angry. "Behind the bookshelf," Samuel said. "I wasn't prying. It was with Michael's things." Evelyn picked up the ring, her fingers trembling. "He made this for Clara. Said it would be hers when she turned 16. She was only 4 when," her voice broke, and she sank into a chair, clutching the ring. Samuel knelt beside her. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to open old wounds. They're never closed, she said, her voice raw. Every day I see them in this house, their laughter, their faces. I kept it all locked away, thinking it would hurt less. But you've made me remember the good parts, too. He took her hand, the ring warm between their palms. They're part of this place, Evelyn. Keeping it alive honors them. Crane can't take that from you. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the walls between them crumbled. She leaned forward, her forehead resting against his, her breath unsteady. I don't know how to do this, Samuel, she whispered. Let someone in again. You're already doing it, he said softly. One day at a time. The moment was broken by a shout from outside. Jonah's voice, urgent. Riders! Coming fast! Samuel grabbed the rifle from the hall, Evelyn right behind him with a shotgun. Outside, 4 men approached on horseback, their faces shadowed by hats. One carried a torch, its flame flickering in the dusk. Samuel recognized the leader, a hard-eyed man named Doyle, known in town as one of Crane's enforcers. Mrs. Hawthorne, Doyle called, reining in his horse. Mr. Crane's got a message. Sell the estate, or this place burns to the ground. Evelyn stepped forward, her shotgun steady. You're on my land, Doyle. Get off, or I'll shoot you myself. Doyle laughed, but it was forced. Big talk for a widow and a drifter. You got until tomorrow night to pack up. After that, Crane stops asking nice. Samuel raised his rifle. You heard her. Leave. And tell Crane his threats don't scare us. The men hesitated, clearly expecting an easier target. The torchbearer shifted nervously, his flame casting eerie shadows. Finally, Doyle raised a hand. Have it your way. But you'll regret it. As they rode off, Samuel turned to Evelyn. They'll be back. We need to be ready. She nodded, her face set like stone. Then we prepare. For Michael, for Clara, for us. The night was moonless, the Montana sky a blanket of stars pierced by the faint glow of lanterns at Widow's Hollow. Samuel, Evelyn, and Jonah took turns keeping watch, their nerves taut as bowstrings. The threat of Victor Crane loomed larger after Doyle's visit, and the air carried the weight of impending danger. Samuel had rigged a makeshift alarm, tin cans tied to wire around the manor's perimeter, to alert them to intruders. As midnight approached, he sat by the parlor window, rifle across his lap, the brass watch in his pocket a steady reminder of why he was here. Evelyn joined him, her shotgun propped against the wall. She'd changed into a practical skirt and blouse, her hair tied back, ready for whatever came. You should rest, she said, her voice low. You've barely slept. Neither have you, Samuel replied, his eyes scanning the darkness. Crane's men won't wait for us to be ready. She sat beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her shoulder. I used to sit up like this with Michael, she said softly. When rustlers were bold enough to try stealing our cattle. He'd tell me stories to keep me awake, about his grandfather, about the first roses he planted here. Samuel turned to her, seeing the flicker of memory in her eyes. You miss him. Every day, she said. But it's different now. It doesn't hurt the way it used to. You've changed that. Before he could respond, a sharp clatter broke the silence, the tin cans. Samuel was on his feet in an instant, rifle in hand. They're here. Evelyn grabbed her shotgun, her movements steady despite the fear in her eyes. Through the window, they saw flames erupting from the hay barn, the dry wood catching like tinder. Horses screamed in the stables nearby, and Jonah's voice rang out, calling for help. They're trying to burn us out, he shouted, already running toward the blaze with buckets. Samuel turned to Evelyn. Stay here, lock the doors. If anyone gets inside, use that shotgun. I'm not hiding, she said, her jaw set. This is my home. He didn't argue, there wasn't time. They ran outside together, the fire's heat hitting them like a wall. The barn was a lost cause, flames roaring toward the sky, but the stables were still untouched. Samuel sprinted to release the horses, leading them to the safety of a far pasture. Evelyn and Jonah worked to douse the flames, hauling water from the pump, but the fire was spreading toward the manor's outbuildings. Then Samuel saw them, 6 riders emerging from the shadows, bandanas masking their faces. Doyle was among them, his torch casting a sinister glow. Last chance, Hawthorne, he called. Sell or we burn the rest. Evelyn raised her shotgun, her voice steady. You're trespassing. Leave or you'll regret it. Doyle laughed, but it was cut short as Samuel fired a warning shot into the ground near his horse. The animal reared, and Doyle cursed. "You think you can scare us off? There's 6 of us, 2 of you." 3, Jonah corrected, stepping forward with his own rifle, his limp barely noticeable in the firelight. "And you're forgetting the town," Samuel added, his voice cold. He'd sent word to Henry Walsh after the last threat, hoping the ranchers' alliance would hold. As if on cue, hoofbeats thundered from the direction of Willow Creek. Henry, Eli Carter, and 3 other ranchers rode into view, armed and grim-faced. "Drop your weapons!" Henry shouted, his rifle trained on Doyle's men. "You're surrounded!" The riders hesitated, their confidence crumbling. The fire illuminated their uncertainty, and Samuel saw Doyle's eyes dart toward the manor, weighing his options. "This ain't over," he snarled, tossing his torch into the dirt. "Crane'll have this place, one way or another." "Tell Crane he's done," Evelyn said, her shotgun unwavering. "This land belongs to my daughter's memory, and I'll die before I let him touch it." Doyle's men backed off, retreating into the darkness as the ranchers held their ground. Samuel and the others worked until dawn to contain the fire, saving the stables and the manor but losing the hay barn entirely. As the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Evelyn stood among the ashes, her face streaked with soot but her eyes fierce with defiance. "You all right?" Samuel asked, coming to her side. She nodded, though her hands shook. "I killed a man tonight," she said quietly. "One of them tried to break into the house. I didn't have a choice." Samuel took her hand, his touch grounding. "You protected us. You did what you had to." Evelyn leaned into him, just for a moment, drawing strength from his presence. "Crane won't stop," she said. "Not after this." "Then we take the fight to him," Samuel said. "In town, in the open, with the law on our side." They returned to the manor, exhausted but unbroken. As Samuel made coffee, he found Evelyn staring at Clara's recipe book, her fingers tracing a note. Clara's favorite, extra sugar in the cornbread. "She'd be proud of you," Samuel said softly. "You're fighting for her." Evelyn's eyes glistened, but she smiled. "And for you, Samuel. You're part of this now." 3 days after the fire, Samuel and Evelyn prepared to take their stand in Willow Creek. The scorched remains of the hay barn stood as a grim reminder of Victor Crane's ruthlessness, but it had also galvanized the community. Word of the attack had spread, and the ranchers' alliance was stronger than ever. Samuel and Evelyn planned to file a formal complaint with the territorial judge, who was visiting Willow Creek that week, and to publicly declare their engagement, a bold move to show Crane they were building a future he couldn't destroy. As they rode into town, the wagon rattling over the frost-hardened road, Evelyn clutched a folder of documents: Michael's journal, witness statements from the ranchers, and a letter from Jonah detailing Crane's threat. Samuel carried his own burden, the weight of Crane's promised lies about his past. He'd told Evelyn the truth, but the fear lingered that Crane's forged letter could still poison the town against him. The courthouse, a modest brick building at the heart of Willow Creek, was crowded with townsfolk and ranchers. Henry Walsh and Eli Carter were already there, along with Martha Reed and a dozen others who'd felt Crane's pressure. The judge, a stern man named Whitaker, listened as Evelyn presented their case, her voice steady despite the eyes on her. "Victor Crane has been intimidating ranchers across this county," she said, laying out the documents. "He's burned my pasture, set fire to my barn, and sent armed men to my home. My late husband's journal shows he tried similar tactics 5 years ago, and I believe he may have been involved in the accident that killed my family." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Judge Whitaker raised a hand for silence. "These are serious accusations, Mrs. Hawthorne. Do you have proof of Mr. Crane's involvement in this alleged sabotage?" "Witnesses," Henry Walsh said, stepping forward. "My fences were cut after I refused his offer. Martha's well was poisoned. Eli's cattle were driven off a cliff. And now Evelyn's barn is gone. It's a pattern, Your Honor." Before the judge could respond, the courthouse doors swung open, and Victor Crane strode in, flanked by 2 lawyers in crisp suits. His silver hair gleamed, and his smile was as sharp as ever. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "I'm here to address these baseless claims. Mrs. Hawthorne and her employee, Mr. Tate, are attempting to smear my reputation to avoid legitimate business negotiations." Samuel's fists clenched, but Evelyn's hand on his arm kept him steady. Negotiations? She said, her voice cutting. You call arson and threats negotiations? Crane's eyes flicked to Samuel, a glint of malice in them. I call it unfortunate timing. But since we're discussing reputations, perhaps the court should know about Mr. Tate's history. He produced a folded paper, holding it up like a trophy. This is a sworn statement from Edward Hollis, a respected surveyor in Boise. It details Mr. Tate's theft of valuable maps and funds, crimes that drove him from his last 3 towns. The crowd whispered, and Samuel felt the weight of their stares. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. That's a lie, Crane. I was cleared of those charges. Hollis's family wanted me gone because I wouldn't falsify surveys for their land grab. You're using their old slander to pressure Mrs. Hawthorne. Crane's smile didn't waver. And what of Mrs. Hawthorne's past? A widow who's been less than grieving, shall we say. My sources tell me she's been seen in compromising situations with hired men before Mr. Tate. Perhaps her resistance to my offer is less about principle and more about personal entanglements. Evelyn's face went white, but her voice was steel. You're a liar, Crane. My husband and daughter died because of your greed, and now you're trying to ruin me with gossip. I've lived alone for 5 years, and Samuel Tate is the first man I've trusted since Michael. You won't break us with your filth. The judge banged his gavel. Enough. Mr. Crane, you'll produce this alleged statement for review. Mrs. Hawthorne, Mr. Tate, I'll need corroboration of your claims about the attacks. This court will reconvene tomorrow with evidence. As the crowd dispersed, Crane approached Samuel and Evelyn, his voice low. You think you've won? Papers can be challenged, reputations destroyed. And Mrs. Hawthorne, I have another document, one from a doctor who attended you after your accident. He has interesting notes about your state of mind. Unstable, he called it. Perhaps unfit to manage an estate. Evelyn's hand tightened on Samuel's arm, but she didn't flinch. Try it, Crane. I'm not the broken woman you think I am. Crane's eyes narrowed, but he turned and left, his lawyers trailing behind. Outside, Henry and Eli rallied the ranchers, promising to gather more witnesses for the next day's hearing. Clara Benson, the shopkeeper, pulled Evelyn aside. Don't let him rattle you, she said. The town knows you, Evelyn. We see what you've done with Widow's Hollow, how you've brought it back. And we see Mr. Tate, too, a good man, no matter what Crane says. That evening, back at the manor, Samuel and Evelyn sat by the fire, the weight of the day heavy between them. Samuel broke the silence. I'm sorry about Crane's lies. I should have warned you he'd go after you, too. Evelyn shook her head. You told me the truth about your past. That's what matters. And I meant what I said in there. You're the first person I've trusted since Michael. I don't care what Crane says about me. Samuel reached for her hand, his fingers brushing the silver ring she now wore on a chain around her neck, Clara's ring, a symbol of the family she'd lost and the future she was building. Then let's make it official, he said, his voice steady. Marry me, Evelyn. Not just to spite Crane, but because I love you. Because we're stronger together. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, he thought she might pull away. Then she leaned forward, her lips brushing his in a kiss that was both tender and fierce. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Samuel Tate, I'll marry you. They held each other in the firelight, the promise of their future a shield against Crane's threats. But as they planned for the next day's confrontation, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that Crane had one more card to play, and it would be his most dangerous yet. The morning of the courthouse hearing dawned cold and gray, with storm clouds gathering over Willow Creek. Samuel and Evelyn rode into town with Jonah, their wagon loaded with every piece of evidence they could muster. Michael's journal, statements from ranchers, and a new find, a ledger Samuel had discovered in the manor's attic, detailing payments Crane had made to a local surveyor years ago, hinting at sabotage before the accident that killed Michael and Clara. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough to cast doubt on Crane's character. The courthouse was packed, the air thick with tension. Judge Whitaker sat at the bench, his expression unreadable as Evelyn and Samuel presented their case. Henry Walsh and Eli Carter testified about Crane's intimidation tactics, while Martha Reed recounted the poisoning of her well. The crowd murmured, their support for Evelyn palpable, but Crane sat calmly, his lawyers whispering strategies. When it was Crane's turn, he stood, his voice smooth as polished stone. Your Honor, these accusations are a distraction from the real issue, Mrs. Hawthorne's inability to manage Widow's Hollow. I have here a medical report from Dr. Amos Reed, who treated her after her accident. He held up a document, its seal official-looking. It describes her as emotionally unstable, prone to delusions of persecution, hardly fit to run an estate or make sound decisions about its sale. Evelyn's face tightened, but she stood, her voice clear. That report is a fabrication. Dr. Reed was a friend of my husband's. He'd never write such lies. And if I'm so unstable, why have I kept Widow's Hollow running for 5 years, even through my grief? Crane's smile was predatory. And what of your hired man, Mr. Tate? I have another document. He produced the letter from Edward Hollis, waving it for the crowd. It details his theft in Boise, a pattern of deceit that followed him here. Can you trust a man like that, Mrs. Hawthorne? Can this town? Samuel stepped forward, his heart pounding but his voice steady. That letter's a lie, forged by the same kind of men who work for you, Crane. I was cleared in Boise, and I've got witnesses who'll say so. But let's talk about you. This ledger, he held up the attic find, shows you paid a surveyor to falsify reports on Widow's Hollow's water rights before Michael Hawthorne's death. Convenient, wasn't it, that his carriage went off a cliff a month later? The crowd gasped, and Crane's composure faltered for a fraction of a second. That's preposterous, he snapped. A desperate attempt to deflect from your own crimes. Then let the judge decide, Samuel said, handing the ledger to Whitaker. And let him see the witness statements from every rancher you've threatened. You're not just after Widow's Hollow, you want this whole valley, and you'll burn and lie to get it. Judge Whitaker called for order, his gavel sharp. I'll review these documents in chambers. This court will reconvene in 2 hours. As the crowd spilled outside, Crane approached Samuel and Evelyn, his voice low. You think you've outmaneuvered me? I have more resources, more connections. This isn't over. It is for you, Evelyn said, her eyes blazing. You underestimated us, Crane. You thought grief made me weak, thought Samuel was just a drifter you could scare off. But we're not alone, and we're not afraid. Crane's smile was cold, but he turned away, his lawyers trailing him. Clara Benson, standing nearby, squeezed Evelyn's arm. You did good in there, she said. The town's with you. 2 hours later, Judge Whitaker returned with his ruling. The evidence against Mr. Crane is compelling but not conclusive for criminal charges. However, the ledger and witness statements warrant an investigation into his business practices. I'm issuing an injunction preventing any forced sale of Widow's Hollow or other properties until this matter is resolved. As for the accusations against Mr. Tate, I find no credible evidence to support them. The court dismisses Mr. Crane's claims. A cheer went up from the ranchers, and Samuel felt Evelyn's hand slip into his, her grip fierce. Crane's face was a mask of fury, but he said nothing, storming out with his lawyers. The victory was theirs, but Samuel knew Crane wouldn't vanish quietly. That evening, back at Widow's Hollow, the manor felt different, warmer, alive with possibility. Samuel and Evelyn sat by the fire, the silver ring on its chain glinting at her throat. We won today, she said, her voice soft but strong. But he'll come back. Let him, Samuel said. We've got the law, the town, and each other. He can't break that. Evelyn leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. When I hired you, I thought you'd be gone in a week. Now, I can't imagine this place without you. Samuel kissed her forehead, the weight of his past lighter than it had ever been. Good, because I'm not going anywhere, Mrs. Hawthorne, soon to be Mrs. Tate. She laughed, a sound that filled the room with light. Let's make it official, then. Tomorrow, at the church. No more waiting. The morning of the wedding broke clear and bright, the Montana sky a vivid blue over Widow's Hollow. The rebuilt hay barn, still smelling of fresh pine, was transformed into a celebration space, adorned with wildflowers and ribbons courtesy of Clara Benson's tireless efforts. Half of Willow Creek had turned out, their wagons lining the estate's drive, their laughter and chatter filling the air with a joy the manor hadn't known in years. Evelyn stood in her room, wearing a simple ivory dress she'd found among her mother's things, altered to fit her frame. The silver ring, Clara's ring, hung on its chain at her throat, a quiet nod to the past she carried forward. Samuel waited downstairs, dressed in a borrowed suit from Henry Walsh, his brass watch polished and tucked into his pocket. He was nervous, more than he'd been facing Crane's men, but the sight of Evelyn descending the stairs, her green eyes bright with hope, steadied him. The ceremony was held in the barn, with the circuit preacher officiating and Jonah as best man, his weathered face beaming with pride. Clara stood as matron of honor, her eyes misty as she handed Evelyn a bouquet of roses from the garden. The vows were simple, spoken with the weight of two people who'd fought for this moment. When Samuel slipped a plain gold band onto Evelyn's finger, one he'd crafted himself in the estate's workshop, etched with tiny roses to match Clara's ring, she felt the last shadows of her grief lift. "You took a job nobody wanted," Evelyn said during her vows, her voice steady but thick with emotion, "and gave me back my life. I love you, Samuel Tate, for your stubborn heart and your steady hands." Samuel's voice was rough as he replied, "I came here with nothing, Evelyn, but you gave me everything, a home, a purpose. I'll spend my life making sure you never regret it." The crowd cheered as they kissed, the sound echoing through the barn. The reception spilled into the afternoon, with fiddle music from Eli Carter and tables groaning under the weight of food brought by the townsfolk. Children darted through the crowd, their laughter mingling with the lowing of cattle in the distance, and for the first time in years, Widow's Hollow felt like a home again. As the sun dipped toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and lavender, Samuel and Evelyn slipped away to the manor's porch, watching the celebration from a quiet distance. "No regrets?" Samuel asked, his arm around her. "About marrying you? Fighting off arsonists? Facing down Crane?" Evelyn smiled, leaning into him. "Not one." Samuel's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "I went to the graves this morning," he said softly. "Michael and Clara's, out by the creek. I told them about you, about us. Told them I'd take care of their home, their roses, their legacy." Evelyn's eyes glistened, but her smile held. "They'd like you, Samuel. Michael would have admired your grit, and Clara, she'd have followed you everywhere, asking you to fix her toys." "I hope so," he said. "I'm part of their family now, and yours." Evelyn touched the ring at her throat, then the gold band on her finger. "Family's not just blood, is it? It's the people you choose, the ones who stay when it's hard." "Exactly," Samuel said, kissing her knuckles. "And I choose you, every day." The music shifted to a slow waltz, and Samuel stood, offering his hand. "Mrs. Tate, may I have this dance?" She laughed, a sound that warmed the cooling air. "I thought you'd never ask, Mr. Tate." They danced in the barn's open doorway, under the glow of lanterns and the watchful eyes of their neighbors. Samuel was no expert, but he moved with care, guided by Evelyn's gentle corrections. "Where'd you learn to dance like this?" he asked, grinning as she spun him with surprising grace. "Michael," she said, her smile nostalgic but not pained. "He insisted a lady should know how to lead, even on a dance floor. He'd be glad I'm teaching you." "I'm glad too," Samuel said. "I like that they're part of this, part of us." As they danced, Samuel thought of the journey that had brought him here, the accusations in Boise, the towns he'd left behind, the job nobody wanted. He'd come to Widow's Hollow broken, but Evelyn had shown him that broken things could mend, that love could grow in the cracks of a wounded heart. Victor Crane had vanished from Willow Creek after the courthouse ruling, his hired men scattering when the judge's investigation tightened. The Ranchers' Alliance held strong, with nightly patrols and shared resources ensuring no one faced Crane's shadow alone. Widow's Hollow had become a symbol of resilience, proof that people could rebuild from loss and stand against greed. Through the barn doors, Samuel caught sight of a new sign he'd carved for the estate: Widow's Hollow, Samuel and Evelyn Tate. It stood proud against the darkening sky, a promise of the life they were building. Tomorrow they'd wake as husband and wife, tending the roses, mending fences, and filling the manor with new memories. Evelyn had taken a chance on a drifter, and Samuel had found a home, a purpose, and a love stronger than any storm. The music played on, and under the Montana stars, Samuel and Evelyn danced, surrounded by friends, their hearts full of the quiet certainty that they were exactly where they belonged.